Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today, we're going to share Skinwalker horror stories. First story, the Skinwalker found me. Me and my fiancé recently bought a house together in Greenville, Michigan. For those of you who don't know, Greenville was a small town when I was growing up, but now it is booming. It is a ways away from any other large towns, and once you pass through it, you are basically in state lands. The other night, we were getting ready for bed with our dog Grizzly. I had to work the next morning at 6 a.m., so I went to bed around 10 p.m. She stayed up working on her homework. As soon as I laid down, my dog started barking at me. My fiancé came into the room, put him on a lead, and took him outside. I started to fall asleep. Not 30 minutes later, he starts to bark again. This time I get up and take him outside. He doesn't poop or pee, just stares off into the woods. After 10 minutes or so, I went back to bed. I woke up multiple times throughout the night having this strong feeling of dread. I had this feeling that someone or something was walking around my house stalking it, as if it wanted to get inside. Midnight came, and she was finally laying in bed with me. Not 10 minutes into us laying down, and Grizzly is barking again. We yell at him to shut up, which doesn't work. He doesn't speak English. So fiancé gets up and is gone for 30 minutes. She comes back crying. I asked her what is wrong, and she said everything is fine and went to bed. He started to bark within 30 seconds of her laying down. Naturally, I am annoyed and pissed off because my dog is being a brat. I get up, tell him to stop barking, and put him on the lead. Take him outside again. He stares off into the woods and pees. As we were outside, I look into the woods with the flashlight I bought with me. Behind my house is an unfenced backyard. I have two neighbors on either side and a neighbor diagonal to my right. Behind me and diagonal to my left is all tress to woods that are not very large, but orably 3 square miles. I am scanning the woods knowing that there are coyotes, raccoons, foxes, etc. in there. As I scanned, I saw a deer. Spooked me, but I didn't really think much of it until it started to stand on its hind legs. As soon as it did that, my dog immediately started to walk toward the back door to get back inside the house. I froze for a second and gained my composure and walked to the door and go inside. As go inside again, starts to bark again. This time I ignore him, for I have to be up in 4 hours for work. He eventually settles down and goes to bed. Woke up at 5 with 1.5 hours of sleep and called into work. My drive is a good 40 minutes. I knew if I went, I was going to fall asleep at the wheel. I stayed home that day. My fiancée got up and left for work at 8. Later in the evening, as she is telling me about her day, she tells me that I left the back slider door unlocked last night. As she said that, my eyes widened and I kind of lost my breath. I told her I was sorry, like it was no big deal, but I was freaking out on the inside. Then she brings up Grizzly and says he was growling so much last night. I was so scared. I cuddled you a little harder last night. I asked her why she was scared, and she said she had this feeling that something was in the giraffe room. We call it that cause it has a glass table, but the legs are all giraffes, like something evil. The thing was in my house. I went to go into the room later on, and it smelled terrible, like someone took dog poop, dried blood, and rotten food, left it in the sun for a few hours, and threw in that room. The smell is gone now, and I don't have the heart to tell that why fiancé what I saw. Second story, 2 encounters with a skinwalker. I am from Michigan. However, I joined the Army when I was 21 and got stationed out in Colorado. Fort Carson to be exact. I am a single male, so I lived in the barracks with a roommate. My roommate was from New Mexico and is if Navajo decent. We didn't really talk and wouldn't say we are friends, but he had a conversation from time to time. One day, I was looking up creepypastas and heard about Wendigos and skinwalkers. The more I learned about them, the more interested I became in them. Then we went on rotation to Europe, and I forgot all about them, until we went to Germany, where we didn't do much but sit around. That is where my fascination with them started again. I would go to sleep listening to skinwalker stories. Something about being scared and sleeping is invigorating to me. I know, weird. In the stories, it would always say, don't ask a Navajo tribe member about them, cause they will shut you down. Well, me being me, I found my roommate, let's call him Justin, and I asked if he believes in them. Surprisingly, he didn't shut me down. He got kind of excited and said, "Yeah, dude, I haven't seen one, but I want to." My parents used to tell me about them. About 2 months later, we headed back to the States, did our army stuff, and went on with our lives. Once again, I forgot about the skinwalkers and wendigos. Until I didn't. I like to go on drives and listen to music, relaxing to me, I guess. I usually go during the day because the route I take has no lights on it for miles at a time. While at work one day, we were really busy and really stressed out. I need to relax, so I decided I'd go on a drive. It was about 9:45 p.m. For anyone who has been on Fort Carson, I headed out Gate 1. Now, out of Gate 1, you have 3 options. Go to the right, which will bring you to downtown Colorado Springs. Go straight, which brings you somewhere never took it. Or go left, which brings you on a windy road through the foothills of the mountains. Naturally, I went left. I started driving with a pitch-black road, my music blaring and unwinding. I got about halfway on my usual drive. Then I heard a noise. It was the highest-pitched, bloodiest-sounding scream I have ever heard. I heard over my music. I turned down my music, not knowing what just happened. Again, I heard it, only a little louder. Out of now, where the smell of rotten eggs fills the air, I decided that now is a good time to turn around. I pull off to a side road and flip a U-turn. That's when I saw it in my rear view mirror being lightened up with the red of my brake lights. A skinwalker. Since it would dark out and the red light didn't do much, I couldn't make our super specific details, but I saw these bright yellow eyes that pierced through the night. It has antlers on its head, and it was standing on the back feet. I sat there for what seemed like forever, frozen in fear. It started to walk toward my car. With all my might, I told my body to move and move now. It didn't listen, frozen in fear. It got closer. All of a sudden, my phone rings and breaks me out of the trance. I let off the brake and put the pedal to the floor. The entire way home, I was going 70 to 80 miles per hour, looking in my rearview mirror every 5 seconds. I swear I saw it a few times. I figure it was chasing me because the smell didn't go away until I got to Gate 5 of Fort Carson. I scanned my CAC and speed back to TH Barracks. Once I got back, I ran inside, not talking to anyone on the way. Got into my room and sat on my bed, wondering if what just happened was real. I finally looked at my phone to see who called. Luckily, my best friend, we will call him Steve, called to get me on Xbox to play. I had another encounter with a skinwalker. Not as long or as scary as the first one. We were in the field down south in Colorado, in Pinyon Canyon. It was close to the end of our 3-week field problem. We dug foxholes at night, and somebody had to take first watch. Of course, that someone was me. The foxhole was about 100 meters away from our line of trucks. I get into it, and once again, I start to smell rotten eggs. I don't think much of it, cause the cooks were always throwing away old food. I scan the area over and over looking for OP4. Well, my friend Steve, same guy from the first story, yells out to me, "Hey, we don't have to do guard tonight. Safety stand down." From a good 50 meters away, I yelled back acknowledging him. Then from in front of me, I heard, "Hey, you don't have to do guard," in Steve's voice, but in a lower, raspy voice. I look in the direction it came from, and there was Steve standing in the tree line. I couldn't believe it. This time I knew it was a skinwalker, cause that explains the smell, and Steve being canned the other side if the concertina wire. The rest of the field problem went normally, and I haven't had an encounter since. I have moved back to Michigan and am living a happy life. However, these encounters pop into my head now and again. Third story. Sweat Lodge Keeper is a skinwalker. I don't know how long I will be on this earth anymore. Sweat Lodge Keeper is a skinwalker. I don't know how long I will be on this earth anymore. My name is Adrian. I am an 18-year-old Native American. I live on the Kewin Reservation. My favorite sport is lacrosse. I'm actually really good at lacrosse. I even played a championship game for my school out on the reservation. My friends, Mason, Dan, and Andrew, and I always go to this sweat lodge 4 times a week. The rules in a sweat lodge are very clear and must be followed. You must never talk unless you are asked to speak. Women and men must be on different sides of the lodge. The women must sit like mermaids, never with legs crossed. Only the men in the lodge sit with their legs crossed. It's forbidden for a woman to enter the sweat on her moon time. She must wait until her time is done. All women have to cover their bodies neck to toe, usually wearing tall gowns and long pants. You cannot wear accessories, as our first ancestors came with nothing on their first days on the physical earth. As the keeper says, never bring any negative energies inside of the lodge. Every 4 sessions last from up to 45 minutes. Sometimes these sweats can be as long as 5 hours. The sweat lodge works by using really hot rocks that have been sitting in the fire for hours. The keeper splashes water onto the rocks, causing really hot steam inside of the sweat. It's dark. When I say dark, it's dark. You literally cannot even see your own hands. Even close up, the sweat has a keeper. The keeper is the one who runs the lodge and sends prayers throughout the world. In my reservation, the keeper's name was Lawrence. We call him Larry for short. I found this man weird. He was always twitching in inhuman manners. He always had coyote pelts. Sometimes he would even wear one as a cloak. I never thought much of it at all. I always just thought he was connected to the spirit of the animal. Sometimes his stare gave me chills down my spine. His eyes had no life in them. They just terrorized me. His eyes were similar to that of a coyote. His voice was erratic. But other than this, he was a normal man. I enjoyed his company. He was usually an understanding man and taught me many native teachings and folklore. He knew a lot of teachings I never even heard any elder mention in my life. Lawrence always gave off a weird energy. Sometimes the energy felt the same as staring at an animal straight into the eyes at midnight. The bright yellow eyes. Something felt off about him. His pupils were oddly very small, with the rest of the eyes larger. This gave him a terrifying look. His drumming and singing was powerful. His drumming felt like an ocean wave hitting against me. His singing sounded like a ritualistic chant, comparable to a wolf chuffing. If this all doesn't weird you out, sometimes his eyes glow firing red with white pupils. I've noticed this only happens when he has the skin of a coyote on his back, especially when he wears the coyote. His hands and feet were really abnormal compared to normal humans' hands and feet. They had webs in between the fingers. His nails were similar to claws. Lawrence is a man who lives in a small home on the reservation, far off into the wooded areas. He lives alone. His house was created all by his work. By the way, not to mention his indigenous name is, which translates into walking coyote. This name can explain his passion for coyotes. My friends Mason, Dan, Andrew, and I are crazy. We would always whistle after 9 o'clock at night. When we did, I would always hear something running inside of the woods. We all hated the running footsteps. Sometimes we would even get a reply back with whistling. A few times we would hear screams from hell, from quite literally hell. They didn't even sound human. The screams weren't just screams. They were animal-like screeches. They always had coyotes and lynx-like screams. We all were the troublemakers of the reservation, so our names are always known when mentioned. No one says who, what, when we are mentioned. Except for Lawrence. I don't know why everyone doesn't like talking about him. They all tried to keep Lawrence a secret. Only a few people knew him. They were all elders. Nobody younger than 40 knew him. Only Mason, Dan, Andrew, and I were the only younger ones who knew him. I don't know why the elders would always shush us when we mentioned walking coyote. Right after the sweat sessions were done, I would always help Lawrence clean up the sweat lodge. Sometimes he would invite me to go find rocks in the river for the next sweat. Lawrence and I had the strongest relationship out of Mason, Dan, and Andrew. Our sweat is shaped like a pregnant woman's stomach. The materials used to shape the sweat are willow and deerskin. In the winter, the sweat is protected inside of a warm, cozy cabin. Yesterday, Lawrence was acting a bit unusual compared to how abnormal he already is. Yesterday, his coyote skin cloak had feathers and coyote teeth as earrings on the coyote's ears. His eyes were even creepier. His pupils were tinier as the rest of the eyes were shaped more circle-like, almost like a goat's eye. Not weird enough, he grew a few inches taller. He called us into the sweat. We all entered the sweat. The spirits are ready. Whenever you are, Lawrence announced. Confused as we are now silenced because the sweat has already started. He also announced that an elder is visiting us in the second round. The elder wouldn't be male, he stated. Rather, the elder was female. We never usually had a female visitor. Suddenly, I heard Mason, Dan, and Andrew choking. They were suffocating, and Lawrence kept on drumming as usual. I got worried and asked him to stop the sweat. He silenced me and told me not to worry because they're going to be safe in the spirit life. He kept on going, chanting and drumming, and I finally had realized that Lawrence is a powerful evil witch. I wanted out. I tried to open the sweat lodge door, except Lawrence grabbed my leg and told me not to worry because I am safe. When I sat down, I closed my eyes, shutting tightly. Out of command, my eyes were forced open. I couldn't close them. Damn right, I couldn't even squint my eyes. I saw two eyes, two red eyes that glow. The two eyes had white pupils. The second round has reached. The elderly women came inside. It was Kokum. She liked it when we called her Kokum. She greeted me and held my hand. Then she went to the opposite side of the room from me. I kept my head down in fear. My body couldn't help but tremble. I cried to myself because on the second round, Mason, Dan, and Andrew had just disappeared into the thin air. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I broke the lodge door and ran out of the sweat. I still heard the drumming afar from me. The drumming was getting more aggressive as the farther I ran. The chants were no longer a human's chant. The chant was the sound of coyote yipping and howling. I ran into the forest. I hid inside of a bush. Suddenly, the drumming had stopped. I heard a blood-curdling scream from afar. I didn't look. I couldn't move from the amount of shock my body handled. I could hear a coyote running, not to mention it's winter. I heard canine-like footsteps running. It was approximately 25 meters away from me, according to myself. The same footsteps me and my friends heard. The coyote was 20 meters away, now 10 meters away from the forest. The footsteps gave me trauma. But then the walking coyote turned the other direction. As I got the chance, I ran out of the bush from the forest. I heard the bastard following me. The thing was taunting me. It would stop for a while, and then it would run again. I ran until I reached my Annie's house. The coyote backed away because my Annie was burning cedar. Skinwalkers do not like cedar. My Annie worried for me. She knew what exactly happened. She told me I didn't need to explain because she understands. She gave me warm chicken noodle soup and a piece of baked bannock. She put me to bed. I'm traumatized. The coyote is peering through my window. I am writing this at night. The coyote won't leave me alone. The eyes unsettle me. The eyes are human. The coyote is tall and stands on its hind legs staring at me through the window. Not to mention the arms are the shape of Lawrence's arm. My Annie told me to stay inside of my room. I have cedar burning inside of this room. My Annie had told me it's better to stay here because if I leave the room, the coyote would climb inside of the chimney. It's funny because my window is 7 feet above the grass, and the walking coyote is standing with its hands peering through. My Annie has no neighbors with her. All I can do is sit in my room, hoping I would be saved by someone. Somehow, my Annie tried to contact a medicine man to send spiritual help from afar. I'm staring into Lawrence's eyes as I'm writing this. Have a good day. Fourth story. I accidentally invited a skinwalker into my home. I know, you must be wondering how it's possible to accidentally do that. But hear me out. I never was really superstitious, and when I recently moved to this new town, I did not expect that to change. Anyway, I'm new to town, so what do? I throw a housewarming party, invite everyone nearby, and the party goes on well enough. I feel like I've got to know at least some of my neighbors okay-ish, or at least as okay as you can in a few hours. And eventually the party winds up, and everyone leaves. I look back at the house and the mess left, which I will of course put off for tomorrow morning. I was about to wind up and go to bed when my front door camera picked up someone near it. I opened my phone, wondering if someone had left something behind in the house. I opened the footage on my phone and saw no one. Looked out the window, nope, no one there. I would have thought it could have been some kids playing a prank, but it was 2 in the morning and I was going to just shrug it off when it alerted me again. I opened the footage, and this time I was very confused. I had no idea what it was that I was looking at. It looked like a dog, but far too big to be one. I only got more confused as someone stood up on its hind legs. And there was something off, for lack of a better term, about it. The eyes weren't moving or blinking. It looked like a costume of some sorts. At first, I thought it was a furry and not some eldritch creature, not sure encountering which one would have been worse, to be honest, and opened my window and screamed at whoever it was to leave. Needless to say, this didn't work, as I heard weird noises in response. Before I could think of anything else, there was a loud crash and I realized someone had torn the front door down. I immediately regretted that I was on the first floor. There was nowhere to hide. I couldn't run anywhere, and so I broke a window and then hid in a clothes that was out of the way. My hope was that the intruder would think that I had jumped out the window and ran and get out rather than check the closet. Unless they were a thief, but I had a gut feeling this was no robbery. They were here for me. Through the crack at the bottom of the closet, I could see a shadow move across the opposing hallway. I could hear it now. It sounded like a weird mix of human and animal. I then heard a thump and assumed it had jumped out the window, but I was so scared I didn't even move or dare make a sound until the sun came well up at around 8 a.m. As you can imagine, the fact that my front door was busted down drew a lot of attention. I called the cops, and though they might have been a bit skeptical at first, the signs of damage to my property were impossible to ignore, not to mention the footage from my camera. Later that day, Dan, someone I had just met, came over. He asked a few questions, then shifted his eyes around. I know you might not believe me, but I think you encountered a skinwalker. Dan told me how he had seen one around these parts as a boy, but had been sensible enough to run back inside his house until the beast went away. As per him, those things Cowdle only get inside if you invited them in. But I never invited this one in. I protested. I was pretty cranky about the whole thing, given the lack of sleep, and to that, he simply pointed at my front door. The banner that said, "Everyone's welcome," that I had hung out before last night's party. Everyone. I had just handed that thing a blanket invitation. I took it down immediately. Even now, I sometimes wake up at night wondering how it would have been if my trick with the window hadn't worked. Thank God it did, though, but I learned my lesson. Never again would I issue out a blanket invitation like that. Fifth story, SKINWALKER story. This story takes place during one of my last few semesters in college during spring break. A group of friends and I decided that we should go on a road trip to Utah and camp under the stars. It was a beautiful idea, and one, if a normal experience, I would have done again. The drive came and went quick enough, but we needed special permission to get to the site that we had read about, and the only way was to talk with some elders of the Navajo tribe and to receive a blessing to keep us safe out in the untamed wilderness. This process took the longest, and we were issued warnings that we should have never taken lightly. That was weird. Like really weird, my friend Jackson said. Let's wait to talk about it until we set up camp. Distance, you know, I said, gesturing to the group of people just yards away from us. Aside from Jackson, our group included both of our girlfriends, Jasmine and Charlie. They were also shaken up by how odd the ceremony we had gone through really was. I put my hand on the back of Charlie's neck. She jumped, but relaxed when I leaned forward and gave her a kiss on the head. It was supposed to be a blessing. We should feel lucky. Let's get to the campsite and set up dinner. I said to the group. I was spooked too, but as ever there needs to be someone grounded. I smiled to everyone, exerting a type of pressure I didn't know I was capable of. Everyone's edge seemingly died down by the time we reached the portion of desert we wanted. We set up 2 tents and got dinner going. The drinking started not soon after, and all of us found ourselves drunk and in awe of the setting sun. I raised my bottle up with my arm around Charlie and spoke aloud to whatever we all did to deserve what we have. I met eyes with Charlie and planted a tipsy kiss on her lips. Everything up till this point felt like a dream, of course, that came to an end when Jackson approached me after the last of the sun's light had gone away and we were surrounded by the desert sand and darkness. I still feel unsteady about the whole ritual thing they did. Jackson said, meeting my eyes with his. Jackson was so stressed he could hardly stay still. So, I take it you don't want to do scary stories tonight. I joked, taking another drink out of the cooler. I just feel like we're being watched. Jackson said flatly. I sighed. What do you want to do? Do you want all of us to cancel this trip, leave all of our stuff, and find a motel for the night? I asked. I trusted Jackson, and he saved my life more than I could count. So I was willing to put my trust in him. If our campsite is still here in the morning, I won't mind staying. It would mean that I was wrong, and I'll buy you and Charlie dinner, as an I'm sorry for wasting your time kind of thing. Jackson's eyes pleaded just as hard as his words did. Let's do it, I said, placing my drink into the sand. I'm coming back for that. The girls weren't happy at all. They were sloppy drunk and upset that Jackson wanted to leave. But I took the lead and let my charisma take the wheel. I exerted the same carefree pressure and attacked the situation with grace, calming the girls down. The fear in Jackson, though, was deep. Something during the ritual had really spooked him. We made the hour drive back into town. Confused, the girls were agitated and they didn't understand why we had to leave, but they fell asleep and left Jackson and I to drive. It was the words they used, man, Jackson trailed. What do you mean? I just feel off. I feel like it wasn't a blessing. This concerned me. I did some research on Native American tribes in the area, and I didn't get far. Secrets are how these cultures survive is something I remember reading. I let out a sigh as we pulled off the highway and into a motel with vacancies. Jackson and I bought separate rooms and carried our women respectively into them. Charlie and I slept fine, but Jasmine, on the other hand, was irritable the whole morning. Charlie talked to her on our drive back in whispers. Apparently, Jasmine spent the latter half of the night trying to ward off Jackson's continuous panic attack. Whatever feeling he had really gotten to him. The drive was tense, but when we arrived at the campsite, everything was fine. Everything we left there was virtually untouched. Our activities continued as they would. We sang, we goofed off, drank liquor, ate food, fucked. It was the trip that we had all dreamed of until I stumbled across the beer I had left there. The beer was empty, and the top part of the bottle looked chewed at the top. I picked it up and disposed of it without the others noticing. I didn't want Jackson to freak out once more, but now my guard was up, and I felt the eerie feeling of being watched. It was intense, and the panic attacks he experienced had a real reason. I hid the feeling for as long as I could. But with dusk approaching again, I elected to pull Jackson off to the side under the guise of bro talk. It's something deep, I told the girls. What up, man? Jackson asked. I believe every word you said, and I think we should leave tomorrow morning. I also think we need to convince the girls to sleep with all of us in one tent. I said, my eyes wearily meeting his. How? What happened? You remember the bottle I put down when we left last night? Oh fuck, man. Jackson gritted his teeth. You have any idea what it might be? I nodded and pointed at the ground and wrote the name SKINWALKER into the sand before erasing the word. I said, we can't talk about it. They're attracted to it. We both nodded. Neither of us knew how to handle the situation we found ourselves in. When we made it back to the campsite, neither of the girls could be found, and Jackson and I lost it, shouting for our women to come back. Needless to say, we were stressed. Jackson was 2 steps away from getting the revolver out of the car when the girls made their appearance. What's wrong, guys? Why are you guys stressing so hard? The two asked us separately. I took a deep breath to clear my head. Jackson and I were spooked, and you guys were nowhere to be found is all. I responded, and he nodded, making eye contact with me. There were things that I noticed immediately when the girls came back. Charlie was almost a full 2 inches taller, and her legs looked almost disproportionate. Charlie's legs were skinnier, and she looked lankier, but neither of those things were something noticed first. What I noticed first were her eyes and how they were animalistic. It felt like they saw me as prey, and they pierced right through me. Shivers rolled down my spine and affected me throughout my whole body. I pulled out of my fear response with Charlie's hand on my shoulder. I felt my heart skip a beat, but I had to play it off like nothing was wrong. I needed to tell Jackson what I thought. I stood and gave Charlie a hug. "You want a beer?" I asked that like that. She responded. I turned away and my eyes welled up with tears. The realization came that my Charlie was most likely dead, and I coughed, almost unable to hold back both my rage and my despair. "Jackson!" I hollered and gestured him over to the cooler away from both the girls. He looked at me, and almost instantly he recognized the pain that was hidden behind my hastily put-on facade. He made his way over to me and placed his hand on my shoulder just as that thing had a few moments before. A single tear rolled down my cheek as I moved his hand away. "Don't," I gritted my teeth. "We need to leave. Now, and without Charlie," I whispered. His eyes narrowed and stared me down before we spoke. "I don't know what realization you came to, but I'll trust you as you trusted me. I'll start making prep to leave. We can leave the site built, but I'll grab the important things and toss them in the truck." He whispered. We both nodded, and from that point, I kept Charlie away from the truck. It was going well in the right context. Jackson got his girl drunk enough to sleep, and he put her in the truck and grabbed my gun, hiding it in his clothes. I did my job, too, keeping the creature away from the other two. I asked her if she wanted another drink, to which she responded positively, too. Charlie never got that drink. I gave Jackson a signal to get to the truck, and we both got in stressfully and started on our way out of the fucking wasteland that would be our deathbed. I floored it. We were going over 100 in seconds, but from my rear view, I saw the body of my girlfriend take the mangled form of a coyote and begin to chase down the vehicle. "Come on," I wheezed. Jackson looked behind and saw what I had, and his anxiety spiked. He began to breathe heavily, and he pulled the gun out from his clothes, gripping it, making his knuckles white. What I assumed to be a skinwalker was keeping pace with our car, and our escape seemed to be impossible. It was gaining on us. This thing was performing an impossible feat, and it looked like we were going to make it to the end of the reservation. However, just over 2 football fields away from the sign that marked the edge of the protected land, the coyote form vanished, and when it did, something popped our rear tire, and the car began to lose control. I tried to stop it, but we slid sideways, and the car flipped. The impact knocked me out. By the time I came to, I was in so much pain that crawling from the wreckage was enough for me to cry out in pain. Coughing, I tried to push myself to my feet once out. I looked around, and my gun was nowhere to be found, and neither were what's left of the group. I saw a puddle of blood behind the vehicle that I refused to go investigate, and the horrible sounds I heard all around me made me feel as if I were in a nightmare. I heard a broken imitation of Charlie's voice and gross and distorted tearing noises. I can only assume what that was. I shuffled toward the end of my hell, refusing to look back. I was traumatized already. There was nothing I wanted to do or to see. I even left the gun behind. My ankle and arm were definitely broken. I used the pain to push myself forward. I stumbled, and the noises weren't stopping. They were getting closer. No footsteps, but the verbal distorted screams and coos. I would have shot myself had I brought the gun with me, but I made it off of the protected land and crumbled to the ground. In my daze, I looked back behind me and saw something I'll never forget. What I saw was this slick gray thing peel my dead girlfriend's skin off its body and run off into the distance under the moonlight, mocking me, laughing and screaming and using my "This is the last I'll speak of this, and I'll never go anywhere near native land ever again." 6th story, Finding Skinwalker Cave. Once, my uncle told me of a story about how he had seen skinwalkers by Shiprock, New Mexico. My uncle was a long-haul truck driver. He was coming back from Colorado and had pulled over by the Shiprock to stretch his legs and let his dog pee. We are Navajo, so he knew better to be walking around down there around sundown. But he was always mischievous and curious. His dog, Mose, got out and peed right away and wanted right back in the truck. No matter what my uncle did, he couldn't convince Mose to take a walk with him, even though they had been in the truck for over 10 hours. So my uncle takes a walk toward the actual Shiprock, and it's almost sundown. He continues to climb the rock. See, his friend had told him a story about a secret cave up on top, and he wanted to see if it was true. He continued to climb and circle the mountain. Soon he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He felt wrong in the pit of his stomach, but he had to see what was going on up there. I'm by no means condoning his actions. Soon he began to feel a weird vibration in his feet, but before he could process what was happening, he heard chanting. He began to climb again. The higher he went, the louder the chants got. It was almost as if they were calling to him. Soon he began to see a glow on the rocks. The closer he got, the more he could see the fire dancing against the rock walls. He carefully slid up a rock, and he was shocked to see 4 men dancing in animal skins. They circled the fire, always dancing, always chanting. Soon they began to change right before my uncle's eyes. My uncle was hidden low, but unable to move. The men's legs began to change as they danced. They were throwing some sort of herb into the fire and dance, round and round. My uncle watched as their hands began to turn into paws, but still they danced. Soon their faces began to morph and blur. My uncle felt a sickness take place in his chest and stomach. But what could he do now? He had to stay hidden. Their coyote faces still chanted, and their long coyote legs still danced. Soon their melodic chanting turned into howling. They still danced with 2 legs. The night was dark. There was no moon, no light except the light that came from the fire. My uncle wanted to run, but he knew if he ran, it would be sure death. While he was thinking, and all of a sudden the skinwalkers took off in the blink of an eye. They ran down the mountain as if it were nothing. My uncle watched as they all went in different directions. He knew this was his only chance at escape. He tore down that mountain like he had a rocket up his ass. His words. He finally made it to his truck. His hair was still standing up on his arms. He jumped up to open the door, and there by the handle was a giant coyote print. It was red. He dared not touch it. He opened the door and started his truck up. He got out of there as fast as he could. He started to head towards Gallup, New Mexico. He was doing 70 down the highway, trying to get as far away as he could. When he looked out his passenger side window, he saw a giant coyote keeping pace with him. My uncle said it was almost like it smiled at him. It then ran off into the desert, and he never saw it again. He got up the courage to go back up the mountain in the daytime a couple of years later. He couldn't find the cave, and there was no evidence anything had ever happened there. He was sure some sort of bad medicine made it possible for them to do what they did. He also told me he was wearing his cedar berry necklace my grandma had made him. It had shielded and protected him. He died about a decade later, having had bad luck the rest of his life. Respect the old ways. Don't be going out at night and looking for evil because it just might find you. 7th story. What it's really like to be a matured skinwalker. I tried to jot down all the explanation that came to my mind last night, and rereading it made me realize it was oddly difficult for others to understand. So perhaps this time I would start the story way back when I was first born and work my story up to now as a not-so-human human. I'm a skinwalker, or I figure that's what I'm called. Yep, that scary folklore kind of skinwalker. First, let's clarify. No, we're not dogs with no tail or guys who walk on 4s. We are not witches. We are not once human either. What you have read and watched online are lies, adaptations, and exaggerated versions of skinwalkers during our early state of development. Think of a toddler learning to walk and talk. Being a dog, a fish, a deer, a bird, half a bird, or even the first few humans was our toddler phase. We were learning to mimic. I was born a spherical fleshy core the size of a pea, with an eye, a tail, and a mouth. A round red lump of tadpole red meat creature capable of seeing, eating, and doing some extraordinary things to survive. It is hard to have one word that describes what skinwalkers do as infants. In fact, I don't think we even have a word for that, so I'll try to break it down so everyone can understand the step-by-step process of us growing up. As a baby, I was durable and animalistic. I had a strong tail that allowed me to spring and jump like crickets, but it was instinct not to jump as it requires energy to do so, and as a newborn, you don't have the luxury of carbs. We were vicious, opportunistic hunters, and we had our foul odor to attract the first prey. Unlike other tadpoles who started underwater and preyed on fish, I started alone on land, probably because of my parents' choice of birthing location. My first prey was a bear cub during warmer season, which I was very proud of. It sounds way cooler to hunt a bear than a fish. I jumped into its nostril as it was sniffing me. Then I wiggled my way up to the brain area. Their instinct told me to do 3 things: eat, copy, replace. I feasted on a small portion of the brain and quickly fell asleep. When I woke up, my first thin layer of protection had already coated my red, skinless self, as if the resting time was my body breaking down the structure and chemicals of what I just consumed. It automatically made an exact copy of said portion. There I had my first apartment, inside a bear cub whose brain I gradually ate and replicated until one day I was completely able to control its limbs. Although imitating the movements of other bears was awkward and proven to be an ugly task. The outer layer of myself at that point was the exact size of the bear's real, no longer exists brain, while my real self, the red tadpole that I was with an eye and a mouth, was resting peacefully inside, like a snail. Except the fact that I have 2 shells when you think of it, the bear body itself, and a layer I made that looked and functioned like a bear brain. The bear's head at that point was hollow without me. Soon I learned to behave and hunt salmons like other bears. Soon I learned to shrink and expand my brain shell. Then I learned how to temporarily travel outside of that shell. I would shrink my real body, open a small hole of this brain, and venture south to feast on the spinal bone marrow. It took me days to finally eat all of them and come back up top. Although I was very young, my dexterity allowed me to glue the brain shell to the fake spinal cord that I just made. Soon I realized I no longer had to venture out and use my real mouth to eat. I can consume the bones, muscles, and veins of the bear as long as it touches my outer layer, the fake brain and the fake spinal cord. However, the indirect eating process is significantly slower than eating with my mouth, as the enzymes my shell produced were not as concentrated. I gradually ate and faked the bear inside out. Then I learned to soften and harden my bear shell so I could shrink even more, to the point it felt like it was but a thin layer of meat wrapping around my tadpole core. I ate and cloned all the bones and muscles of the bear, but left the fat and the skin as it was nasty to consume. Had I shrunk my shell and left the bear there, it would have been nothing but its skin on the ground. Imagine a skinless, fatless adult brown bear walking around, or half of that imagery walking around. The tales of skinwalkers being dogs with no lower half, deer with no tail, humans who walk on 4s probably stemmed from there. People saw our very first attempts to mimic living creatures, and we weren't so masterful at disguising. Again, we were toddlers. I didn't leave the bear and venture out as a skinless monstrosity, though. I lived in my comfortable home for a long while, until one day I smacked a domestic dog unconscious at night. I shrank all of myself as much as possible and left the deflated bear via its mouth. I grew from the size of a pea to a kidney bean before I left. I then wiggled my way to the dog's brain through its mouth. There I ate the brain within hours of the night. However, in the middle of my feasting poured in a new experience. I'd call it not food-related good memories. At first it was foreign and shocking to me, for I ate the bear's brain since it was a young cub. My entire memory as the bear was simply the joy of me eating salmons and berries. But when I was in this dog, it was something else. Joy and happiness that weren't associated with food, but with a foreign creature that was significantly taller than me. In the dog's memories, the creature always showed its teeth as if it was trying to eat the dog. I learned that showing teeth means aggression, behavior back when I was a bear, because that was what older bears did. They try to scare each other with their teeth. I thought this creature, the human, was trying to eat me, the dog, but at the same time the dog itself associated that aggression with joy. As a baby skinwalker, I didn't know shifting from one species to another would be such a challenge. And that was 11 years ago. I'm a male human host now, and I don't need to eat anymore, if not at all. I only eat to maintain the host body. I don't take over people for the sake of comfort eating either. I only eat when I need a new identity. I don't eat their brain completely like I used to do, because doing so will kill the host immediately once I leave them. I learned that the hard way. I often have sex with the next potential host, and while they're sleeping together, I leave the worn-out home for a new journey. And yes, skinwalkers can sense each other. We can also kill if we want to, but challenging mankind is not our interest. We just want to survive and thrive as a species. It's no use trying to irritate the host. There's something hunting U.S. Marines in the desert of California. I want to remain anonymous due to the nature of the story. See, I was in the Marine Corps. No, I wasn't in any special forces or anything unique per SC. I was just a regular rank and file Marine. I was stationed at 29 Palms Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Training Center, CAC for short. I wasn't the only one who has seen or experienced things in the training grounds and surrounding areas. I was told to keep my mouth shut, but I'm going to die soon anyway, so even if they do come for me, it isn't going to make a difference. It was during early April, so the weather wasn't too bad. It wasn't hot during the day, and it wasn't cold at night. I always enjoyed doing field ops during that time of the year. I got away from the dumb shit that we had to do day in and day out back on main side, and I was typically left to my own devices while out in the field. So late one night, me and a buddy of mine are doing fire watch for our section of the rest area. We had our rifles, plate carriers, helmets with our NVGs, night vision goggles, mounted on the front, and rifles with us. We also had 4 mags apiece of live ammo. That night, an artillery battalion was doing night practice, so you'd hear the echo of the guns followed by the sound of the shells hitting the ground and exploding. It just sounded like far-off thunder. Me and my friend were talking about just random crap when I flipped down my NVGs and saw movement out in the distance. At first, I thought it was just the green tin of the goggles with my head, but then I saw it again. I tapped my buddy and asked if he was seeing this. He flipped down his NVGs too, and he nodded. Yeah, but what is it? Coyote. He asked no. Too big to be a coyote. Besides, it looks like it's running around on 2 legs. I said back to him. That's when he tapped me and pointed out into the dark. There's more than one bro. He said. I looked to where he was pointing, and that's when I saw 4 or 5 other figures darting around in the dark. These things weren't that big. I'd say maybe about 5 feet 5 inches give or take. They also appear to be very strong and built with massive arm and leg muscles. They were dark and their skin looked leathery. They had big dark eyes and no nose to speak of. Their mouth was wide and filled with razor-sharp teeth. They walked around hunched over with their arms dangling by their sides. Their arms themselves were massive. They ran at insane speeds, occasionally running on all 4. They had 4 fingers on each hand, and the claws were long and sharp. It was like they had daggers on there for nails. Dude, I think they're getting closer. I nodded, yeah. I'm gonna go get the corporal up. He nodded, and I raced over to where our corporal was sleeping and shook him awake. Hey man, there's something out there. You need to come take a look. He cursed under his breath and sat up. This better be good, he said as he sat up. That's when we heard gunfire. I raced back to my buddy who was frantically shooting into the dark. I looked and I saw these creatures out in the dark, maybe 400 to 300 yards away. As other Marines had woken up to the sound of my buddy shooting, the OIC, officer in charge, came running up asking what was going on. When we pointed to the creatures, he froze in place. About this time, we heard tons of gunfire suddenly erupt from another unit who was conducting training as well. When I looked back at where these things were, they were no longer there. Instead, they were running on all 4s directly at us. I raised my rifle and began to fire at them as those with guns and ammo joined in and the others who didn't ran back to get theirs. I lined up my sights with the closest one and began to fire into it. I saw chunks of its flesh get ripped off when I hit it and it tumbled down, but without missing a beat, it regained its balance and kept sprinting at us. At that point, I knew our rifles were useless, but I wasn't going to leave my buddy. That's when I heard the OIC yelling for us to get back in the trucks and get out of there and get back to main side. Me and my friend turned and booked it for our 7-ton. I flipped on the battery switch and my buddy cranked the truck on. As we began to start moving, I looked out the window in time to see these things reach the camp. A Marine who hadn't realized what was going on until it was too late was impaled by one of the creature's claws and fell to the ground. I watched as he tried to crawl away, but the thing leaned over a bit his upper torso and head completely off with a single bite. As we began to turn out of there, I saw a Humvee that had 3 of these things on racing towards it. The guy in the turret tried to flip the .50 cal around to unload into the creatures, but he wasn't fast enough, and one of them ripped him out of the turret and flung him to one of the others. He didn't have time to move before the thing sank its claws into his chest and began to eat him. I watched as the thing on top of the Humvee then jumped down onto the hood and shattered the bullet-resistant front glass and pull out the mangled corpse of the driver and run off into the desert with him. The remaining 3 Marines got out and made a run for our truck. I tapped my buddy to let them get on. They never made it. One by one, the things picked them off and ran off with them, their screams fading off into the desert. By the time we got back onto the main road back to Mainside and caught up with the rest of our unit, we noticed how active the night sky had become. There were helicopters everywhere with searchlights. We figured someone had called it in and they were trying to find the creatures or the missing Marines. Well, what was left of them anyways? When we were next up at the checkpoint, I noticed something off about the guys manning it. They were all black, with black ski masks over their face and their NVGs down. They didn't have any patches, name tapes, or no identification with them. They were armed to the teeth, though. One of their vehicles had a minigun mounted on it. They all carried high-powered rifles with high-tech sights, laser sights, and other attachments on their rifles. When it was our turn, they had us step out of the truck and tell them what we saw. After we explained everything, the guy in charge looked at my friend and listed off his full name, date of birth, social security number, where his mom and dad were, the name of his dog that he had when he was in middle school. He then looked at me and did the same thing. Once he was done, he looked at both of us. If you mutter a word of what actually happened here tonight, you and your families will disappear for good. Do you understand? We both nodded with our jaws on the floor. The guy had mentioned things that I had never told anyone about. They then told us that if anyone asks, a group of Marines went off to go get something and wound up getting lost. With that, they sent us on back to the main side of the base. I got out about a year after that, but I never went on another field op again. To this day, I still relive that night when I go to bed each night. I just hope that whoever they were, they killed those things, so no more Marines have to go out like that. In short, if you're ever stationed in 29 Palms, CA, and you go on a field op, keep an eye out in the dark and be sure you aren't far away from a vehicle and pray those things don't decide to turn you into a meal. 8th story, an encounter with a skinwalker. Okay, before I tell my story, I will summarize what a skinwalker is to those that may not know. A skinwalker is a being or entity that kills an organism and uses the skin as a disguise. It is mainly active at night, but will observe during the day. Its favorite disguise is that of a human. A skinwalker's most noticeable traits are yellow glowing eyes and, if you can see close enough before you're killed, decaying flesh. Anyway, I was heading to a small town in southern Utah with my wife and a couple of friends. We were on our way to see Lee, a friend of mine that we hadn't seen for a long time. We met up with him at his place and decided to hang out in a nearby lake. It was a typical quiet campsite with a fire pit and a couple of logs around it. We had a little picnic there and were exchanging stories and catching up with each other all day. Eventually, one of my friends, Bryce, got tired and decided to fall asleep in the car while the rest of us continued talking. At this point, twilight had fallen. Erica and I were discussing something while my wife and Lee were talking about something else. All of a sudden, my wife and Lee fall silent. Erica and I quickly notice. We look at them and Lee says, "Get in the car." I asked him, "What's wrong?" And he says there might be a skinwalker out around. Now, Erica and I had no idea what a skinwalker was at the time, so we asked him to explain. After his explanation of what it was, Erica and I, being the only sensible thinkers of the moment, and Bryce just barely waking up from us jumping in the car, decided we should investigate, believing that it was probably just some kids in a nearby campsite trying to mess with us. We came to the top of the hill that was between our campsite and the next and looked for any likely candidates for the scare. None. All we could see was a couple of trees and some bushes. We even called out and there was no response. As we were walking back to the campsite, we heard it, a rustling in the bushes behind us. We look again, but see nothing. At this point, we were considering that Lee and my wife may be right. We get back and it's getting dark fast, so I asked them, is there something we could do to keep them away for a little bit? Yes, said Lee. They don't like fire. And him, my wife, and Bryce start working on a fire while me and Erica go down by the lake to collect the 2 liters we had put in the water to keep cold. Now it's dark, and as Erica and I head back with the sodas, we hear rustling in the bushes beside us. We're both scared. We hurry back and start putting everything back in the car as quickly as possible while Lee made sure the fire kept burning. After getting everything in the car, I rush over to the fire pit and tell everyone to get in the car as I proceed to stomp the fire out. Right as the fire went out, I hear a blood-curdling scream across the lake. I felt my heart stop. Lee had said skinwalkers are fast and could make a full lap around this lake in a matter of seconds. I jump in the car and yell, "Go." Right as the engine started and the lights come on, we see it coming out of the bushes in front of us. Glowing yellow eyes and what looked like a zombified coyote with decaying flesh. A skinwalker. We backed up and peeled out of there as fast as we could. This happened 2 years ago, and it still scares me to know how close I came to death. I'm honestly amazed that we all survived such a close encounter with this being. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Till the end, subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.